Hey folks, this is Dr. Colleen Sierra. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and the founder and executive director of Sierra Center for Behavioral Health. This will be my last video on mental health awareness. And I wanted to talk to you guys about something in particular as it relates to therapists experiencing mental health struggles and overwhelm. I was recently asked to write an article about this really crazy idea that therapists are humans too, and that therapists struggle too. Wow. And it seemed silly to me at first. I was like, well, yeah, I can write this article. But then I realized that it's obviously somebody thinks this is newsworthy. So probably a bunch of people think this is newsworthy. So maybe I should be talking about this. And I feel like this is something that we do a lot at CCBH through our social media, that we try to normalize it. But I wanted to address some of the questions that this article asked of me specifically. So one of the things it said was, what tends to make you as a therapist feel overwhelmed? And again, it made me smile because I was like, everything? My husband, my marriage, my children, my family, my friends, my business, life, like everything can make me feel overwhelmed at times. I mean, right? Wouldn't that be your response? Like, everything about life can feel overwhelming, depending on what season or chapter of our lives we're in, depending on what side of the bed we woke up on, depending on what we've eaten that day, depending on if for us women, if we're on our period. These are all, like, life is overwhelming, right? Life is overwhelming. So, but for me specifically, I feel most overwhelmed when my trauma experiences get triggered. So for me personally, that's when I feel like I'm a burden to someone by either being too much or not enough. And where's the balance? I don't know. The perception that someone's upset with me, but they're not communicating that to me directly, which means that I feel like I can't do anything to make it better. That's very triggering for me. The feeling that I have to do it all perfectly all the time, or I'm a fraud. That is big in my life. The habit of feeling like I'm not allowed to have wants or needs, at least without feeling loads of guilt and shame about the fact that I have wants and needs. So I spend all of my energy taking care of everyone else. When I fall into that trap, that's very overwhelming. In general, health and safety concerns. When my kids get sick, it's very triggering for me because I have a medical trauma history. So health and safety concerns, especially with my kids, is huge for me. So those are some of the things that overwhelm me. The next question is, so how do you navigate stress and overwhelm, which is a good thing to think about and talk about. So it's taken me a lot of years to even have a clue how to deal with stress, pain, and overwhelm in a healthy, productive way. So I'll just say that, because before, what that may have looked like was drinking too much, was eating too much, was isolating, was chasing after love and emotional intimacy. It's looked a lot of different ways for a long time, but I'm finally figuring this out, which is fantastic. So what do? I stop and breathe and take a minute to actually feel what I'm feeling. Overwhelm and panic don't make for good logical thinking. What they do is they make us feel like we just have to escape whatever we're feeling, which tends to lead to impulsive decision making and bad decisions. So I just try to accept it. I try to wrap my arms around it. I try to just feel my way through it, through crying, screaming, talking to a friend, writing something to actually feel it, because feeling it, not running from it, feeling it is the only way that it stops. And it's taken me pretty much my whole life to figure that out. But most days I know that. I know that here, and I know that here now. So That's great. So once I've felt my way through it, once I've had a good cry, once I've talked to a loved one, whatever it is, I've actually felt my way through it. Then I try to think about it and I figure out, so what came before the overwhelm? Was I sad? Was I angry? Was I exhausted? What was I feeling that led to the experience of overwhelm? So again, most of us distance ourselves from our feelings because they can be uncomfortable, and we don't want to deal with that. That gets in the way of our busy lives, and we should be happy all the time. So God forbid we feel something other than happy and grateful. But feelings are there for a reason. They are one of the many ways that our brains and body communicate to us about what it is that we need. So I stopped for a minute and tried to think about what exactly was I feeling before I got overwhelmed, because that's going to point me in the direction of what I actually need, right? So that's an important step. Okay, so then I know what I'm feeling. So let's say I was feeling sad, and I can figure out what I need to do as a result of that sadness. So let's say I was feeling sad because I'm feeling disconnected from my partner, from my friends, from my family. Okay, well, now that I know that, I can approach my partner, my friends, or my family and say, hey, I miss you. I want to connect more. Or let's say I was feeling sad because I feel like I've lost touch with who I am since I've started to have children. Well, then I can say, okay, so what is it that I would enjoy doing that's just for me? Not for my family, not for my husband, not for my kids. What's something I can do that's just for me? And I can take steps to actually do that. I can't get to those things without feeling and then thinking about what I'm feeling and then deciding what needs to be done about it. Wash, rinse, repeat. That's the formula that I try to use very hard instead of doing all of these things that are not helpful, like eating too much, like drinking too much, like desperate search for emotional intimacy and connection. These are the things I try to do now, and they're tremendously helpful. And the last question that I got asked when I was writing this article is, what else do you want readers to know about therapists being human too and therapists struggling? And what I want everybody to kind of really breathe into is this idea that struggling with pain, overwhelm, sadness, stress, worry is just so incredibly human. It's in fact the very definition of what it means to be human. And what I mean by that is that humans are the only species on the planet who can both think and feel. We can think about how we feel. And because we have a prefrontal cortex that allows us to think about how we feel, it means we're going to suffer. It's just part of the package. That is the consequence of having the brains that we do. It means we're going to experience suffering. So suffering isn't reserved for just the crazy, just the sensitive. Suffering isn't reserved for only some. Everybody suffers. And what differentiates it is how willing are we to put that out there and talk about it. So that's one thing that I really want people to kind of breathe into and get more comfortable with and constantly remind themselves. And the other thing that goes right along with that is, because you are suffering, it does not mean that you are broken, messed up, or failing. Let me say that again. Because you are suffering does not mean that you are messed up, failing. What's the other thing that I said? Or broken. That's not what it means. Again, suffering is human, okay? So your suffering is not because something is inherently wrong with who you are. I lived with that idea for more years than I care to count, and I'm done with it. I'm done with it, and I want you to be done with it too. So if we can really embrace the idea that our suffering does not mean that we are broken or screwed up, perhaps then we can be more open about it. we can put it out there. We can talk to people about it, and then we can get the support that we need and deserve. But when we have this wrong idea that we're broken, well, that's shameful. And who wants to admit to anyone that we're broken because of the shame that produces? Nobody wants to do that. So get rid of that idea and start figuring out who in your life is safe to talk to and reach out to them. Because that's not only how we transform our own suffering, that's how we transform the world. So this is an important thing, right? So stop expecting so much of yourselves. The experience of pain and overwhelm isn't weird. It's the definition of humanity. And admitting to this fact that we experience suffering isn't weak, it's brave. Something to think about. Thanks, guys.